The skyline of the city was a jagged crown of glass and steel. But to Aryan Malhotra, it was a canvas of missed opportunities. He stood on the 42nd floor of the unfinished Zenith Tower, the wind howling through the open concrete skeleton of the building. In his hands, he held a set of architectural blueprints, not just paper, but the physical manifestation of 10 years of sweat, sleepless nights, and a vision that bordered on obsession. Aryan wasn't just an architect. He was a sculptor of space. While other firms built boxes to house people, Aryan built structures that breathed. The Zenith was designed to be his masterpiece. It featured a revolutionary, exoskeletal design that allowed the building to sway with the wind like a willow tree, using a complex system of hydraulic dampers and smart glass that changed opacity based on the sun's position. "It's breathtaking, isn't it?" The voice belonged to Vikram Singhania. Vikram was the antithesis of Aryan. Where Aryan was lean, quiet, and smelled of pencil graphite and old coffee, Vikram was broad, loud, and wore cologne that cost more than Aryan's monthly rent. Vikram was the chairman of Singhania Global, the titan of real estate, who had provided the capital to bring Aryan's dream to life. "It's not just a building, Vikram," Aryan replied, tracing the line of the central atrium on the map. "It's a statement. It's the first carbon-neutral skyscraper in the hemisphere. We are making history." Vikram smiled, but the warmth never reached his eyes. He patted Aryan on the back, a gesture that Aryan would later realize was the same way a butcher pats a cow before the slaughter. "History is expensive, Aryan. But don't you worry about the bills. You focus on the art. I'll focus on the empire." The betrayal didn't happen all at once. It was a slow, methodical erosion. It began with the compliance audits. 6 months before the scheduled completion of the Zenith, Vikram's legal team began requesting copies of every single subcontractor agreement Aryan had signed. They claimed it was for insurance purposes. Trusting his partner, Aryan handed over the keys to his digital vault. He had nothing to hide, or so he thought. Next came the budget realignment. Vikram insisted that Aryan move his firm's entire operating capital into a joint escrow account managed by Singhania Global. "To streamline the payments," Vikram had said. Again, Aryan agreed. He was a creator, not a bean counter. He wanted to be in the mud with the engineers, not in the boardroom with the accountants. The final blow landed on a rainy Tuesday in November. Aryan arrived at his office, a beautiful glass-walled studio in the heart of the city, to find 2 men in dark suits standing at the entrance. The locks had been changed. His keycard glowed red when he swiped it. "Mr. Malhotra?" one of the men asked. He didn't wait for an answer. He handed Aryan a thick manila envelope. "You are being served. Singhania Global has filed a lawsuit against Malhotra and Associates for grand larceny, embezzlement of project funds, and professional negligence." Aryan felt the world tilt. "Larceny? I haven't taken a cent. Every dollar went into the steel, the dampers, the glass." "The records show otherwise, sir," the man said coldly. "The joint escrow account shows $10 million transferred to an offshore account in your name. The signature on the wire transfer is yours." Aryan forced his way into the Singhania Global headquarters. He bypassed the reception, ignored the shouting assistants, and kicked open the mahogany doors of Vikram's penthouse office. Vikram was sitting behind his desk, sipping a glass of vintage scotch, looking out at the Zenith Tower, Aryan's tower, which now dominated the horizon. "Vikram, what is this madness?" Aryan screamed, throwing the legal papers onto the desk. "You know I didn't steal that money. You're the one who managed the accounts. You forged my signature." Vikram didn't look surprised. He didn't even look angry. He looked bored. "Aryan, sit down. You're getting saliva on my desk," Vikram said calmly. He took a slow sip of his drink. "You are a brilliant architect, truly, but you are a pathetic businessman. You thought this was a partnership of equals? No, this was a harvest." "You planned this," Aryan whispered, the horror dawning on him. "From the very first day." "Of course," Vikram shrugged. "The Zenith is the most valuable piece of real estate in the country. Why would I share the ownership, the prestige, and the multi-billion-dollar revenue with a creative like you? By the time this lawsuit is over, your reputation will be ash. You'll be in debt for 3 lifetimes. You'll be lucky if you aren't in a cage." "The building won't work without me," Aryan hissed. "The hydraulic systems, the calibration of the dampers. Only I know how to balance the load-bearing frequencies." Vikram let out a harsh, jagged laugh. "I have your blueprints, Aryan. I have your digital models. I have your staff. I offered them double their salaries to jump ship and testify against you. You are redundant." Vikram stood up and walked to the window. He pointed at the tower. "Look at it. It's beautiful. And the best part? Tomorrow the board is renaming it. It won't be the Zenith. It will be the Singhania Sovereign. Your name will never be mentioned in its history. You are being erased, Aryan." The weeks that followed were a blur of humiliation. The media, fed by Vikram's PR machine, painted Aryan as a greedy visionary who tried to rob the man who gave him a chance. His bank accounts were frozen. His car was repossessed. Even his apartment, which was tied to his firm's assets, was seized. He watched on the news as Vikram stood on a podium in front of the tower, cutting a ribbon with golden scissors, claiming all the credit for the architectural innovations. Aryan found himself standing in the rain, outside a local bar, staring at a discarded newspaper. The headline read, "Architect accused of multi-million-dollar fraud flees after firm bankruptcy." He had nothing left but the clothes on his back and a small encrypted USB drive he had kept hidden in his watch, a drive containing the master logic of the building's central computer. He looked up at the Singhania Sovereign. The lights were on. The elite were partying in the penthouse he had designed. Vikram thought he had stolen the building, but he had only stolen the shell. Aryan felt a cold, hard knot form in his chest. The grief was gone, replaced by a singular, icy purpose. He didn't want his money back. He didn't even want his reputation back. He wanted to watch Vikram Singhania lose everything in the very house he had stolen. "You think you know this building, Vikram?" Aryan whispered into the rain. "But I am the one who gave it a soul, and I can take it back." Aryan knew he couldn't fight Vikram in a courtroom. Vikram owned the judges, the lawyers, and the headlines. To destroy a titan, you don't climb the mountain. You dig a hole underneath it. He disappeared. He moved to the slums on the outskirts of the city. He sold his expensive watch to buy a fake ID. He stopped shaving. He let the sun burn his skin and the hunger sharpen his features. He stopped being Aryan Malhotra, the wunderkind architect. He became Shankar, a drifter with a background in basic mechanical repair and a willingness to do the jobs no one else wanted. He spent months studying the movement of the Singhania global maintenance crews. He learned their shift patterns, their weaknesses, and their superstitions. And then, one night, he saw a listing on a crumpled job board. "Night shift maintenance, Sovereign Tower, urgent hire." Aryan, now Shankar, smiled for the first time in a year. It was a dark, jagged smile. The fox was going back into the henhouse, but this time he was dressed as the fence, The transformation of Aryan Malhotra into Shankar was not just physical, it was a psychological dismantling. He had traded his Italian silk ties for grease-stained overalls and replaced his drafting pens with a heavy, rusted, adjustable wrench. His hands, once soft and used to the tactile click of a high-end keyboard, were now mapped with calluses and small, jagged scars from handling raw steel and cleaning industrial solvents. He stood in the service basement of the Singhania Sovereign, his building, waiting for his induction. The air down here was thick with the hum of massive HVAC units and the smell of ozone. "Listen up, Shankar," barked Madan, the head of maintenance. Madan was a man who looked like he had been carved out of a block of salt, hard, bitter, and worn down by years of corporate neglect. "This isn't a desk job. You don't think. You don't talk to the suits upstairs. You see a leak, you plug it. You see trash, you bag it. And for God's sake, stay out of the VIP elevators. Mr. Singhania doesn't like low-level aesthetics, ruining his view." "Understood," Shankar muttered, keeping his head low. His voice was gravelly now, a result of months of silence and cheap cigarettes. Madan handed him a heavy ring of master keys and a digital tablet. "Your shift is 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. You're responsible for the inner core, the plumbing, the wiring, and the dampening shafts from floors 20 to 60. Most guys quit after a week because the shafts are too tight. You claustrophobic?" Shankar looked up at the towering concrete walls of the central core. "No, I know exactly how much space is in there." For the first 3 months, Shankar became a ghost. While the elite of the city were dining on Wagyu beef and sipping champagne on the 70th floor, Shankar was crawling through the ventilation ducts directly beneath their feet. He didn't just clean, he mapped. Vikram had changed the digital security codes, but he couldn't change the physical physics of the building. Aryan had designed the Sovereign with maintenance arteries, hidden passages behind the walls that allowed access to the building's nervous system without disturbing the occupants. Every night, Shankar would slip into the dampening shafts. These were the massive 4-story-high chambers that housed the hydraulic pistons he had designed to keep the building stable during high winds. Sitting in the dark, surrounded by the rhythmic thump-hiss of the pistons, Shankar felt like he was inside the heartbeat of a giant. He began his micro-sabotage. He didn't break anything. Breaking things was for amateurs. Instead, he retuned. Using a specialized frequency generator he had built from scavenged parts, he began to slightly alter the timing of the hydraulic dampers. He shifted the balance by only 0.5%. It was enough to be imperceptible to the human eye, but at high altitudes, it created a subsonic hum. Slowly, the ghost began to haunt Vikram. It started with the lights. Shankar knew the logic of the lighting grid better than the company that installed it. During Vikram's late-night board meetings, the lights in his office would dim by exactly 10% every time Vikram raised his voice. When Vikram would stop talking, the lights would return to full brightness. It was a subtle, maddening trick that made Vikram feel like his own biological energy was draining the room. Then came the whispering walls. Aryan had designed the ventilation to be silent, but by adjusting the tension on the copper louvers inside the vents of the executive suite, Shankar created a physical phenomenon known as aeolian tones. When the wind hit the building at a certain angle, the vents would emit a low, mournful sound that mimicked a human sigh. One night, while Shankar was polishing the brass railings outside Vikram's office, purposely lingering in the shadows, the door swung open. Vikram walked out, looking haggard. His expensive suit was wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "You, Janitor!" Vikram shouted. Shankar stopped, head bowed, clutching his mop. "Yes, sir?" "There's a sound in my office, a whistling, like someone is breathing. Fix it." "I'll check the filters, sir," Shankar said, his heart hammering against his ribs. He was standing 3 feet from the man who had destroyed his life. He could see the pores in Vikram's skin. He could smell the expensive scotch on his breath. Vikram peered at him, squinting through the dim light of the hallway. "Have I seen you before? Your eyes, they look familiar." Shankar didn't flinch. "I have a common face, sir. I've worked a lot of basements." Vikram scoffed, losing interest instantly. "Clearly. Just fix the vent, and stay out of my sight. You smell like industrial cleaner." As Vikram walked away, Shankar whispered under his breath, "And you smell like a falling empire." The most critical part of Shankar's plan was the master logic drive he had saved. The Sovereign was a smart building. Everything, from the elevator speeds to the temperature of the water in the toilets, was controlled by an AI called Apex. Vikram's tech team had tried to wipe Aryan's original code, but Aryan had built the OS on a recursive kernel, a piece of code that looks like a basic utility but actually contains the hidden DNA of the entire system. In the dead of night, in the server room on the 44th floor, Shankar plugged his scavenged laptop into a maintenance port. Access denied. Access denied. He typed a string of coordinates, the exact latitude and longitude of the spot where he and his father had first stood when the ground was broken for the foundation. Access granted. Welcome home, architect. Shankar now had total, invisible control. He could see through every security camera, read every internal memo, and monitor Vikram's private calendar. He discovered that Vikram was planning a massive global investor summit in 2 weeks. He was going to sell the naming rights of the building to a Middle Eastern conglomerate for $3 billion. This deal would make Vikram untouchable. It would cement his legacy and erase Aryan's name forever. Shankar sat in the dark server room, the green light of the monitors reflecting in his eyes. He wasn't going to let that summit happen. He began to write a new script for Apex. He called the file The Reckoning. He wasn't just going to turn off the power. He was going to make the building itself testify against its owner. He was going to turn the Sovereign into a prison, and the walls would speak the truth that Vikram had tried to bury in the concrete. 2 weeks, Vikram, Shankar whispered, his fingers flying across the keys. In 2 weeks, the world will see that you didn't build a masterpiece. You built a tomb. The day of the Global Investors Summit arrived with a sky as gray as unsealed concrete. The Singhania Sovereign was transformed into a fortress of luxury. Limousines snaked around the block, and the lobby, a cavernous space of white marble and gold leaf, was filled with the scent of lilies and high-stakes ambition. Vikram Singhania stood at the center of the 80-floor ballroom, the crown jewel of the tower. He was at his peak. The Middle Eastern delegation, led by a man who owned half the oil in the desert, was minutes away from signing the $3 billion acquisition of the naming rights. "Everything is perfect," Vikram whispered to his assistant. "The climate control, the lighting, the stability. I want these billionaires to feel like they are standing on a cloud, not a building." 80 floors below, in the damp, vibrating heart of the machine room, Shankar sat on a milk crate. His laptop was connected to the building's central nervous system via a fiber optic bypass. On his screen, a countdown timer was ticking. 001452. "You wanted them to feel like they're on a cloud, Vikram," Shankar said, his voice echoing against the steel pipes. "But clouds are unstable, and they always break into rain." The summit began. Vikram took the stage, a holographic projector behind him displaying the history of the sovereign. Naturally, Aryan's name was nowhere to be found. Vikram spoke of his vision, his struggle, and his engineering brilliance. Suddenly, a low rhythmic thudding began. It was faint at first, a heartbeat-like sound that seemed to come from the floor itself. The investors looked around, confused. Vikram smiled nervously. "Just the high-performance elevators, gentlemen. The sound of power." But it wasn't the elevators. Shankar had activated the resonance loop. He had programmed the hydraulic dampers to vibrate at the exact natural frequency of the building's steel frame. As the vibrations intensified, the wine in the crystal glasses began to ripple. Then, the whispering walls joined in. The aeolian tones Shankar had tuned weeks ago now began to scream. The ventilation ducts didn't just whistle. They began to wail in a haunting multi-tonal harmony that sounded like 1,000 voices crying out in pain. "Security! Shut that noise off!" Vikram barked into his earpiece. But the security team was staring at their monitors in horror. The entire digital infrastructure of the building was being overwritten. On the massive holographic screen behind Vikram, the beautiful images of the building's exterior vanished. In their place appeared a grainy high-definition video feed. It was the interior of a server room. The camera angle was low, hidden. The audio was crystal clear. "The joint escrow account shows $10 million. The signature on the wire transfer is yours." It was the recording of the night Vikram had framed Aryan. The ballroom went silent. The investors stood frozen. On the screen, the video cut to a digital ledger, the real one. It showed the $10 million being moved not to an offshore account, but back into Vikram's personal shell company, Singhania Alpha. "This is a prank, a hack!" Vikram screamed, his face turning a blotchy purple. "Turn it off!" He lunged for the control panel on the podium, but as his hand touched the touchscreen, the building's AI, Apex, spoke through every speaker in the ballroom. The voice wasn't the standard robotic female. It was a deep, synthesized version of Aryan's original voice. "Access denied, Vikram. The Sovereign does not recognize your authority." Shankar entered the final command. In the structural core, the hydraulic dampers, the very things that kept the building from swaying, suddenly locked into their extended position on the north side and retracted on the south. The building began to lean. It was only a few degrees, but at the 80th floor, a few degrees feels like a mountain falling. Tables began to slide across the marble floor. The $5,000 a bottle champagne crashed into the ground. People screamed, clutching at the pillars. "The building is falling!" someone shrieked. "It's not falling!" Vikram yelled, desperately grabbing onto the podium. "It's built to sway. It's safe." "Is it, Vikram?" The building's voice boomed. "You saved $40 million by using Grade B recycled steel in the secondary trusses of the 40th floor. Would you like the investors to see the stress test reports you falsified?" A new set of documents flashed on the screen. Blueprints highlighted in red, showing structural weaknesses that Vikram had ignored to maximize profit. The Middle Eastern lead investor turned to Vikram, his face a mask of cold fury. "You didn't just sell us a building," the investor said. "You tried to sell us a coffin." The face of the ghost. The elevators suddenly hissed open. Out stepped a man in grease-stained maintenance overalls, carrying a wrench in one hand and a laptop in the other. The crowd parted as Shankar walked toward the stage. He moved with a grace that didn't match his ragged appearance. He stopped at the edge of the stage, looking up at Vikram, who was cowering behind the podium. Shankar reached up and wiped a smudge of oil from his forehead. He stood tall, his shoulders squared, the Shankar persona falling away to reveal the architect. Aryan, Vikram whispered, his voice cracking. You're dead. I ruined you. You ruined a name, Vikram, Aryan said, his voice calm and terrifyingly clear. But you can't ruin the man who knows how the world is put together. You stole my blueprints, but you never understood the soul of the Zenith. You treated it like a bank vault. I treated it like a living thing. And today, the Sovereign has decided it doesn't want you inside it anymore. Aryan turned to the investors who were clutching the railings as the building continued its forced, terrifying tilt. The building is safe, Aryan announced. I have locked the dampers. It will not fall, but it will also not move until the police arrive to take Mr. Singhania into custody. All the evidence of his fraud, his safety violations, and his theft is currently being broadcast to every major news outlet in the country via the Sovereign's private satellite link. Vikram looked at the screens. He saw his own face on the news. He saw the Singhania stock price plummeting in a vertical line towards zero. He had nothing left. No company, no reputation, and now no building. Aryan looked at Vikram, who was now weeping, a broken man on the floor of the room he thought he owned. Apex, Aryan commanded. Awaiting your command, architect, the building replied. Evict the trespasser. The security doors behind the stage hissed open. Two of the bouncers, men who had once worked for Aryan and whom he had quietly re-enlisted over the past 2 weeks, stepped forward. They didn't even look at Vikram as they hauled him to his feet. As they dragged him toward the service elevator, Aryan picked up a discarded champagne glass. He didn't drink. He simply watched as the sun began to break through the grey clouds, hitting the glass of the Sovereign and making it glow like a diamond. The Zenith, Aryan whispered. Its name is the Zenith. The weeks following the Sovereign Summit scandal were a whirlwind of legal firestorms and corporate collapses. The video of Vikram Singhania being dragged out of his own ballroom in handcuffs became the most watched clip in the history of the city. But while the public feasted on the drama, the real work was happening in the shadows of the building's concrete heart. Vikram's empire didn't just fall, it evaporated. Because Aryan had leaked the structural safety violations alongside the financial fraud, the building's valuation crashed overnight. No one wanted to buy a death trap with a cursed name, except for one buyer, VMB Holdings, a shell company Aryan had spent 2 years building with the help of his silent partners. The investors Vikram had burned in the past stepped in. They bought the debt for pennies on the dollar. 1 month later, the scaffolding returned to the tower. But this time, the banners didn't say Singhania Global. They were blank, white, and clean. Aryan Malhotra stood in the penthouse, no longer wearing grease-stained overalls. He was dressed in a simple black turtleneck, looking out over the city he had conquered from the basement up. His lead engineer, Sarah, the one who had stayed at the firm and secretly funneled data to him for months, walked in. The dampers are recalibrated, Aryan. The resonance loop is gone. The building is perfectly balanced, she said, handing him a tablet. And the name. It's been updated in every registry. Aryan looked at the tablet. Building ID, the Zenith. What about Vikram? Aryan asked. His trial starts next week, Sarah replied. His lawyers quit because he couldn't pay them. The state seized everything. The mansions, the cars, even the furniture in his office. He's currently in a holding cell at the county jail. Aryan nodded. And the janitors? The maintenance crew? Every one of them has been given a 30% raise and a permanent contract. Madan, the head of maintenance, says he's never seen a boss who knows the plumbing better than him. Before the grand reopening, Aryan did one last thing. He visited the state penitentiary. He sat behind the glass partition. On the other side sat Vikram Singhania. He looked like a ghost of the man he once was. His skin was sallow, his hair was thinning, and his hands shook as he picked up the phone. "You came to gloat?" Vikram spat, his voice a pathetic rasp. "You win, Aryan. You took my tower. You took my money. Happy?" "I didn't take your tower, Vikram," Aryan said calmly. "I took my tower back. You were just a squatter with a title deed." "You destroyed my life over a building!" Vikram screamed, slamming his hand against the glass. "I gave you a chance. I made you famous." "You didn't make me, Vikram. You used me. You thought power was something you could steal through a contract. But real power is knowing how the world works. You can take a man's money, his house, and his name. But you can never take his craft." Aryan leaned closer to the glass. "I didn't come here to gloat. I came to give you this." Aryan held up a small matte black card. It was a lifetime membership to the Zenith observation deck. "Every day from your cell window, you'll see the Zenith glowing on the horizon. And every time it flashes its lights at midnight, remember, that's me, checking the systems. You'll be looking at my masterpiece for the rest of your life, and you'll know that the only thing you ever built was your own cage." Aryan hung up the phone and walked out without looking back. The story of the Janitor architect became a legend in the city. The Zenith became the most prestigious address in the country, a symbol of resilience and the triumph of skill over greed. But Aryan didn't stop there. He didn't just become another corporate titan. He turned the basement of the Zenith into a lab for the displaced. He hired architects who had been blacklisted, engineers who had been laid off, and creators who had been stepped on by the Vikrams of the world. He stood on the balcony of the 80th floor, the wind whipping his hair. The Zenith didn't sway anymore. It hummed, a perfect, stable frequency. "Apex," Aryan said. "Awaiting your command, architect," the building replied. "Open the roof. Let the sun in." As the glass ceiling of the penthouse slid back, Aryan looked up at the sky. He had spent 2 years in the dark, in the dirt, and in the walls. He had been a ghost, a janitor, and a thief. But as the sunlight hit his face, he was only one thing. He was the architect, and his foundation was finally, truly, unbreakable.